Jakia and Rashad had the kind of love story that felt almost too perfect, a romance that millions envied and admired. From the outside looking in, Jakia and Rashad embodied the perfect romance, unwavering devotion, shared ambitions, and a bond that seemed unbreakable. But beneath the carefully curated images and heartfelt captions lay secrets, tensions, and a growing darkness neither of them could escape. How does a relationship that once symbolized resilience and devotion unravel so tragically? What happens when love transforms into possession, and trust shatters into deadly obsession? Before we dive into this shocking case, like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales of love, lies, and betrayal. Jakia Nduru had built a name for herself as a beacon of resilience, a woman who had faced unimaginable hardship and turned it into a source of inspiration for thousands. Her online business thrived on her ability to connect with people, to make them believe that even in the face of adversity, hope was never lost. She shared stories of perseverance, faith, and love, painting a picture of a woman who had not let tragedy define her. Her followers saw her as a warrior, a living testament to the power of belief. Her accident had changed her life forever, but it had not broken her. Instead, she had used it to fuel her purpose. Paralyzed from the waist down, she became a fierce advocate for disabled women, ensuring that their voices were heard in spaces where they were often overlooked. She preached independence, self-worth, and the idea that love was still possible, even in a world that often deemed women like her undesirable. And then came Rashad Graves. Rashad was everything she had ever dreamed of in a partner. Handsome, charismatic, and strong, he had an energy that commanded attention the moment he entered a room. A successful construction manager with deep roots in his community, he was known for his leadership, his work ethic, and most of all, his unwavering loyalty to those he loved. He carried himself with confidence, a protector at heart, and when he set his sights on Jakia, it was as if the universe had aligned. Their love story unfolded like a modern-day fairy tale. Their first date was a whirlwind, an instant connection that felt destined. Rashad treated Jakia as if she were the most precious thing in the world, never seeing her wheelchair, only seeing the woman who had captivated him. Soon, their relationship became the kind that social media obsessed over. Lavish vacations, intimate moments captured in carefully curated photos, and long, heartfelt captions about love, strength, and destiny. Jakia called their love unshakable. Rashad was her rock, the man who had restored her faith in romance. He carried her when she was tired, defended her against critics, and spoke about her with such devotion that their followers believed in the kind of love they had only seen in movies. When he proposed in a grand, public gesture that instantly went viral, it was as if their story had reached its peak, a testimony that love could truly conquer all. To the world, they were a power couple. Proof that disability did not equate to a life without love or desire. Proof that true devotion transcended the physical. Jakia's followers idolized their bond, believing that Rashad was a rare breed of man, the kind who saw beyond limitations and only embraced possibilities. But behind closed doors, reality was far more complicated. Love was not just grand gestures and social media highlights. Love, at its core, required trust, patience, and balance. And while Jakia and Rashad presented a perfect image to the world, small cracks in that foundation had begun to form. Moments of tension that never made it to the carefully curated posts. Words left unspoken, feelings pushed aside for the sake of keeping up appearances. Because when the cameras were off, when the world was not watching, their love was not as unshakable as they wanted everyone to believe. Rashad's love for Jakia was real, or at least, that was what he told himself. In his heart, he knew he had never planned to be unfaithful. But temptation had a way of creeping in through the cracks of even the strongest foundations. For over a year, he had been involved with Shaquana Hill, a 26-year-old bartender with a wild streak and a body that made men lose their minds. What started as casual flirtation had spiraled into a full-fledged affair. Shaquana had no idea that Rashad had no intention of ever leaving his wife. She was convinced that she was the one he truly loved, that Jakia was just an obligation, a woman he stayed with out of pity. She didn't know that when Rashad left her bed, he went home to Jakia and kissed her like nothing had changed. The affair was an open secret among Rashad's friends. They joked about it, patted him on the back, and reminded him that a man has needs. To them, it wasn't betrayal, it was just life. And since Jakia never questioned him, they saw no reason for Rashad to stop. He told himself that his love for Jakia was different, that what he had with Shaquana was just physical. But deep down, he knew he was playing with fire. As their wedding anniversary approached, Jakia noticed the shift. Rashad had always been affectionate, always attentive, but lately, he seemed distracted. The late nights grew more frequent. The cryptic text messages, the sudden need to step out for work emergencies, the way he held his phone close to him even when he slept, it was all too much to ignore. At first, she pushed the doubts away. She reminded herself that Rashad was a good man, that he had never given her a reason to suspect him before. But doubt was a seed that, once planted, only grew. One evening, as Rashad was in the shower, Jakia's hands trembled as she reached for his phone. She knew it was wrong. She knew she might find something she didn't want to see. But the feeling in her gut had become unbearable. She unlocked his phone and scrolled through his messages. And then, there it was. A series of explicit texts between Rashad and Shaquana. Pictures. Voice notes. Plans they had made together. Words that shattered everything she believed about their love. Jakia felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Her hands went numb, her vision blurred, and for a moment, she thought she might pass out. The man she had given everything to, the man who had promised to cherish her, had been lying to her for over a year. Her mind screamed at her to stay calm, to think rationally, but the pain was too great. She heard the water shut off. Rashad stepped out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist, humming to himself like nothing had changed. But for Jakia, everything had changed. She looked at him, tears streaming down her face, and held up the phone. Who is Shaquana? The color drained from Rashad's face. For the first time in their marriage, Jakia saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. Fear. Jakia's hands shook as she scrolled through Rashad's messages, her heart pounding against her ribcage. She read the words again and again, hoping, praying that she had misunderstood, that there was some logical explanation for the filth her husband had been exchanging with another woman. But there was no mistake. The explicit nature of the texts, the way Rashad spoke to Shaquana, promising her things he never promised Jakia, left no room for doubt. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. This was the man she had defended to the world, the man who had kissed her forehead and sworn to protect her. She had spent years convincing herself that Rashad was her safe place, her warrior in a world that often saw her as fragile. And yet, here she was, staring at cold, hard proof that he had been betraying her. That night, she waited for him. The moment the front door clicked open, she wheeled herself into the living room, her knuckles white as she gripped his phone. Rashad barely had time to take off his jacket before she flung the device onto the table. Who is she? She demanded, her voice steadier than she expected. Rashad paused, his eyes flickering between her and the phone. His jaw tightened. What are you talking about? Jakia felt a fire rise inside her. Don't play dumb, Rashad. I read everything. The messages. The pictures. You've been fucking her behind my back, her voice cracked, but she refused to cry. Not in front of him. Rashad exhaled heavily, rolling his neck like he was preparing for a fight. Jakia, you're overreacting. Those messages. They don't mean anything. You know how people talk online. She let out a bitter laugh, a sound filled with nothing but pain. Don't mean anything. You told her you loved her. That you wished I wasn't in the picture. Her chest tightened. How long, Rashad? How long have you been making a fool out of me? He ran a hand over his beard, shaking his head. You always do this. Always assuming the worst. Because you give me reasons to. She shot back. You're lying to my face. Be a man, Rashad. Own your shit. And then, something inside him snapped. The mask he wore so well slipped, revealing the man Jakia had been too blind to see before. His face darkened, his jaw clenching so tightly she swore she could hear his teeth grind. You think anybody cares about a cripple exposing me? His voice was low, venomous. You ain't going nowhere, Jakia. Her breath hitched. The way he said it, the absolute certainty in his tone, it sent ice through her veins. I built you, he continued, stepping closer. I made people believe in you. Without me, you'd still be some nobody on the internet, crying about your disability. She recoiled as if he had slapped her. You what? He sneered. You gonna leave? You think anybody else would want you? His laughter was sharp, cruel. You're stuck with me, Jakia. And you better start acting like a wife who appreciates what she has. A heavy silence hung between them. Jakia stared at him, no longer recognizing the man before her. The love she had clung to, the belief that Rashad was different, it all shattered in that moment. But she wasn't weak. And she wasn't going to let him control her. You're a coward, she whispered. The house was thick with tension, the air charged with the storm of their fight. Rashad's fists were clenched, his breath ragged, his veins pulsing with fury. Jakia, despite the fear tightening her chest, refused to back down. The truth had been exposed, and she was done playing the fool. Rashad took a step toward her, his towering frame looming over her wheelchair. You really think you can ruin me? He hissed, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Jakia held his gaze, her own voice cold and unwavering. I won't be your victim, Rashad. Not anymore. That was the breaking point. With a sudden burst of rage, Rashad lunged. His hands gripped the handles of her wheelchair, yanking it with brutal force. Jakia's body jerked forward as she was ripped from the seat, her limbs twisting helplessly in the air before she crashed to the floor. Her head slammed against the marble tiles with a sickening crack, her vision exploding into stars. A sharp, searing pain pulsed through her skull. She groaned, trying to lift herself, but her paralyzed legs betrayed her. She clawed at the floor, desperate to put distance between them, but Rashad was already on her. Where you gonna go, huh? He sneered, towering over her writhing form. His shadow engulfed her, blocking out the dim glow of the chandelier above. Jakia tried to scream, but the air left her lungs as Rashad's hands closed around her throat. The pressure was immediate, crushing. Her nails raked at his wrists, her body convulsing as she fought for breath. Shut up, he snarled, his grip tightening. You brought this on yourself. Jakia's vision blurred, dark spots dancing at the edges. Her lungs burned, her body thrashed weakly, but the strength in her limbs was fading. She tried to beg, to plead, but only strangled gasps escaped her lips. Tears streaked down her face as her world began to slip away. The last thing she saw was Rashad's eyes, dark, unfeeling, monstrous. And then, there was nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Rashad stumbled back, panting, his hands shaking as he looked down at Jakia's lifeless body sprawled on the cold floor. Her lips had turned a ghastly shade of blue, her once bright eyes frozen open in a glassy stare. The veins in her neck stood out in dark, bruised ridges, cruel imprints of his fingers. Reality crashed into him like a freight train. His chest heaved, sweat trickling down his temple. He had killed her. The woman who had loved him unconditionally, who had believed in him, was now nothing more than a corpse at his feet. Panic set in. His mind raced, the walls of the house suddenly feeling suffocating. He had to make it look like something else, an accident, a robbery. Anything but what it was. He staggered to the front door and wrenched it open. The humid night air did nothing to cool his feverish skin. He grabbed a decorative vase from the hallway table and hurled it against the wall, shattering it into jagged pieces. Next, he stormed into the bedroom, yanking out drawers, scattering their contents across the floor. He knocked over lamps, kicked over chairs, manufacturing chaos. Then, he grabbed a knife from the kitchen and returned to the living room. With a deep breath, he sliced into his own forearm, wincing as blood welled up. He needed to sell the story of an intruder, of a struggle. Satisfied with the scene, Rashad took one last look at Jakia before dialing 911. His voice shook, thick with feigned horror. There's been a break-in, he panted. My wife, she's not breathing. Oh God, please send help. He collapsed onto the floor beside her, pressing his hand against his forehead, practicing the expression of a devastated husband. But no amount of acting could erase what he had done. No lie could change the fact that he had become a murderer. The news of Jakia Nduru's death shattered the internet like an earthquake, sending tremors through every social media platform and news outlet. The woman who had inspired thousands with her resilience and unwavering faith was gone, and the circumstances surrounding her death were nothing short of horrifying. Hashtags flooded timelines, hashtag justice for Jakia, hashtag say her name, hashtag stop domestic violence. Candlelight vigils were held in her honor, and an outpouring of grief and rage swept through online spaces. What had been perceived as a picture-perfect love story had unraveled into a tale of deceit, violence, and betrayal. The media wasted no time dissecting every detail of the case. News anchors replayed clips of Jakia's most inspirational speeches, juxtaposed with images of crime scene tape wrapped around her once happy home. Journalists traced Rashad Graves' past, unearthing stories from his previous relationships, painting a picture of a man whose charm masked an underlying darkness. His affair with Shaquana Hill became public knowledge, fueling discussions about infidelity and the dangers of unchecked rage. Amidst the media frenzy, investigators uncovered crucial evidence that turned the case against Rashad into a near certainty. Jakia had been recording voice memos on her phone for weeks, diary-like confessions in which she detailed her growing suspicions about Rashad's infidelity and his increasingly volatile behavior. These recordings provided a chilling look into her final days. In one, her voice wavered as she whispered, "Something is wrong. He's hiding something from me. I can feel it." In another, just days before her death, she confided, "I don't think he loves me anymore. I think he resents me." But the most damning piece of evidence was a recording from the night of the murder. The audio, muffled but unmistakable, captured the sound of their explosive argument. Jakia's voice cracked with emotion as she demanded answers. Rashad's responses were laced with venom, his anger bubbling over into full-blown rage. The final seconds of the recording sent chills through everyone who heard it, a crash, followed by Jakia's panicked gasps, then silence. Security footage from their home surveillance system further unraveled Rashad's carefully constructed lie. His initial claim of a burglary gone wrong crumbled when detectives found inconsistencies in his timeline. The cameras recorded him leaving the house twice on the night of the murder, once after the fight and again an hour later. His clothes changed, his demeanor different. Phone records placed him near a dumpster where detectives later recovered a blood-stained shirt. The forensic evidence painted a grim reality: this was no accident, no crime of passion. It was a deliberate act of violence. As the trial loomed, the public discourse surrounding Jakia's death grew even more intense. Women's rights activists pointed to her murder as yet another tragic example of the dangers disabled women face in intimate relationships, how vulnerability can be exploited, how love can be weaponized against those who trust too deeply. Others framed Rashad as a victim of his own unchecked emotions, a man who had snapped under pressure and made a tragic mistake. Yet for Jakia's supporters, there was no gray area. Rashad was not a man who had lost control in a moment of passion. He was a man who had made a choice to betray, a choice to deceive, and ultimately, a choice to kill. As the courtroom doors prepared to open, the world waited with bated breath. Would justice be served? Or would Jakia's story become another cautionary tale, lost in a sea of forgotten names? The moment Jakia Nduru's lifeless body was discovered, investigators knew something was off. The crime scene had all the signs of a staged break-in. Glass shards scattered haphazardly, drawers yanked open but untouched valuables lying in plain sight. The inconsistencies in Rashad Graves' frantic 911 call raised further suspicion. His voice was filled with panic, yet detectives noted the lack of urgency, the measured pauses between his words. When they arrived, Rashad was slumped on the couch, his face buried in his hands. His performance was convincing to the untrained eye, but the seasoned detectives knew better. Forensic evidence told a different story. The injuries on Jakia's body were not consistent with an attack from an unknown assailant. Bruises on her arms and neck suggested prolonged physical struggle. The impact wound on her head aligned too neatly with the sharp corner of the marble kitchen counter, as if she had been forced into it. Rashad's alibi began to crumble as surveillance footage revealed his car in the driveway at a time he claimed to be elsewhere. Cell phone records showed a disturbing exchange of messages between him and Shaquana Hill just hours before Jakia's death. One text from Rashad read, "I can't do this anymore. She's pushing me to the edge." As the evidence mounted, authorities turned to Shaquana. Initially, she denied any knowledge of Rashad's plans. But under pressure, she revealed details that shocked even the most hardened detectives. Rashad had confided in her about his growing frustration with Jakia, about how he felt trapped in a relationship that no longer fulfilled him. Shaquana admitted that she had naively believed Rashad would leave Jakia for her, never imagining that his impatience would escalate to murder. With Shaquana's cooperation, the prosecution built a damning case against Rashad. At trial, The courtroom was packed with Jakia's grieving followers, disability rights activists, and those who had once admired Rashad as a devoted husband. The prosecution portrayed him as a narcissistic, manipulative man who viewed his wife as an obstacle rather than a partner. They played Jakia's voice memos aloud, filling the courtroom with her own words of suspicion and heart. The final recording was especially chilling. "I know something isn't right. If anything happens to me, don't believe the lies." Rashad's defense team painted a different picture. They claimed he had acted in a fit of uncontrollable rage, not premeditation. They argued that his affair, coupled with the immense pressure of being seen as the perfect husband, had driven him to an emotional breaking point. The jury was unmoved. The sheer brutality of Jakia's death, the calculated cover-up, and the blatant lies left no room for sympathy. After deliberating for less than 3 hours, they delivered their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. At sentencing, Jakia's mother took the stand, her voice shaking with grief and fury. "You didn't just take my daughter's life. You took away a light that shined for so many. And for what? Because you couldn't handle the consequences of your own choices." Rashad sat motionless, staring at his hands as the judge delivered the final blow, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Outside the courthouse, the public reaction was a mix of relief and sorrow. Jakia's supporters held vigils in her honor, demanding stronger protections for disabled women facing intimate partner violence. Her story became a tragic cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the most picture-perfect relationships can hide unspeakable darkness. As Rashad was led away in handcuffs, he finally lifted his head, scanning the crowd. Whatever charisma he once wielded had evaporated, leaving only a hollow shell of the man he pretended to be. Justice had been served, but the scars of his betrayal would linger far beyond the prison walls. Jakia Nduru and Rashad Graves appeared to have a love story that defied the odds, a romance that inspired millions. But behind the curated images and viral declarations of devotion lay a dangerous undercurrent of deception, betrayal, and unchecked rage. What started as a dream turned into a slow-burning nightmare, culminating in a tragedy that rocked the very foundation of those who believed in them. Jakia's story is more than just a cautionary tale, it's a devastating testament to how manipulation and control can thrive behind the illusion of love. She was a woman of strength, resilience, and unshakable faith, but even she could not escape the fate that awaited her. Rashad's actions were not just a crime of passion but the final, irreversible consequence of a man who saw love as ownership and control as devotion. In the aftermath, the world grieved, debated, and demanded justice. The revelations of Rashad's infidelity, his lies, and his ultimate act of violence served as a sobering reminder that even the most celebrated relationships can hide horrifying truths. Jakia's voice memos, her fears, and the evidence left behind painted a chilling picture of a woman who saw the cracks forming but never imagined they would lead to her demise. Could she have recognized the warning signs sooner? Could someone have intervened before it was too late? These are the haunting questions that remain. As a society, we often celebrate love stories without questioning what happens behind closed doors. We romanticize passion without acknowledging its potential for destruction. Jakia's tragic fate forces us to confront the reality that some of the most toxic relationships were the perfect disguise. If this story shocked you, like and subscribe for more cases that expose the darkest intersections of love, lies, and betrayal.